it might not be quite correct. It is really wrong to speak of Kerala cuisine as one integrated whole. There's so much of variant to it, so much of variant. The food in, say, North Kerala and Kannur, for example, would be very different from North Malabar, not even North Kerala. Northern Kerala is called Malabar, and Northern Malabar, the food there would be different from South Malabar. The food in Malabar, which is North Kerala, would be very different from the food in Central Kerala. The food in Central Kerala itself has so many variants. The food in Trichur would be very different from, not quite different from the food in a district like Kottayam. The food in South Kerala would be very different from all this. And then, so there is the regional differences, and then there are the community differences. The food, I think, that is served in a Nair household or a Hindu household or an Edawa household can be different. The food that's served in Muslim households would be very different. Amongst Christians, the food in Christian, South Syrian Christian households would be different from Latin Christian food, Jewish food you talked about. So there's so many different variants of the Kerala palate. How does this diversity play out? What do you think diversity going to die out in course of time, because communication is so much. You see, just as you see Pepsi and Coca-Cola everywhere, and different types of regional differences dying out. Would you think that these regional differences, firstly, your answer on these, your comments on these regional differences. Secondly, do you think over course of time they might die out?
So I think there is a fair bit of impetus or momentum in the direction of preserving these recipes in its entirety that should be done. So there are some pivotal books also that have been written on this. B.F. Verghese has done a lot on Christian cooking for large weddings and all of that. There's also the Suryani kitchen, which talks at length about the the cooking techniques and that were employed by the Syrian Christians of their time. So I do believe there is definitely something that there is, and this is true of most traditional things, right? They're like lost history kind of thing. As long as society has a concrete action in the direction of preserving it, it is going to die out. That's the unfortunate part of it. But which is even at our restaurant, like for example, I haven't traveled much to the north of Kerala, so I'm not exposed to a lot of the food over there. And yet there are certain, there are these little things there, like a Talasheri biryani, for example, is something that I have eaten because it's one of their biggest, exports in that sense in the rest of Kerala. So I think in order to keep these culinary traditions alive, there is a lot of work that is happening and should continue to happen. And more importantly, restaurants should also take the responsibility of kind of bringing this out in the mainstream and kind of educating people about why one is different from the other, rather than just selling what sells. So this is also something that we are trying to do. It's something that we've, over a period of time, trying to expand our menu, also add in a few things, that we did not have before. But to speak on the differences, right, like on the diversity by region, I would like to believe that this is also it's a majoritarian concept. So if you go to the north of Kerala, it is the only place where I've eaten kallu makaya, which they serve as a how do you say, as a pakoda, where they deep fry it. Like you eat it just like you would a bhaji or a bonda, right? So now the popularity of that item on the street, and you find it in any corner. Like it's not just on the beach along the Calicut or this thing. You find it's very popular out there. Is the reason why it exists in that context, right? Now as you move down south away from there, it disappears simply because there's no demand for it, and also there's no awareness for it. So I think that the differences in food habits between the regions is also driven by what is familiar to these people while they grow up. So for me, the food that is familiar to me that when I was growing up is kappa and mean curry, is the erchi roast, is the biryani. Even the biryanis that I eat at home is completely different from the biryanis that I get at restaurants, where even if it is in a place like Cochin, right? So there are these little treasures. There's in a place called Kodamangalam in Kerala. There is this preparation of kurka. And kurka is a Chinese potato which they cook with coke. I've not heard of it anywhere else in Kerala. Towards again in the Alleppey Alva side, there is kakka erchi fry, which is a small clams and mussels which they deep fry. Karimeen, even though it is the if if we had a national animal for Kerala, I would believe it would be, Karimeen. But even though it is widely popular, it is in a certain belt of Kerala that it is popular, where people can afford it. Also, it's not a cheap fish, right? So it's never going to be a fish of the people, if you may. So there are many. I think that distinction between why different kinds of foods are also popular in different and why it's so varied is a function of social strata, is a function of purchasing power, is a function of availability of these ingredients in these particular, and seasonality, of course.